Hi, everyone. I'm Diane Brady. I'm here with Bill Nettles, who is a lawyer and former U.S. attorney for the District of South Carolina. We are talking about the Murdoch trial. Bill, welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
How big a deal was this firm, PMPED, the storied multi-generational Murdoch firm that's now dissolved and I think apparently reformulated?
Right. It depends on your perspective, right? I mean, if you lived in, Hampton County or Colleton County, and to a lesser extent, Beaufort County, they were a big deal. But frankly, outside of that three-county area, they weren't a big deal. I mean, and certainly not regionally. I mean, so, they were, the proverbial big fish in a small pond.
Now, they were known for a lot of civil litigation, and I'm curious about the
Right.
idiosyncrasies of South Carolina. For example, the fact that you could have, if a company did business in that county, you could essentially sue in that county even if the injury didn't take place there. Is that right?
That's right. So, and thankfully the court has taken steps to and the legislature to temper that. But yeah, I mean, it used to be that you could, if a company had a presence in Hampton County, and then something happened, an injury happened someplace else in the state, you could bring it to Hampton County. Which worked really well for that firm for a while. But what ultimately wound up happening was, the business community got wise to that. And so what you wound up having happen was industry would not come to that county. And as a matter of fact, industry left that county. And so, while it was wonderful for the law firm, that law firm had a huge negative economic impact on a county that was struggling economically and was only made worse by that law firm, because companies just wouldn't come to the county for fear that if something happened in the upstate, they were going to get drug over there and get sued in a county where the lawyers also happen to be law enforcement, the prosecutors. So it was incestuous, to say the least.
Well, you mentioned to talk about, pivot off that, some of the idiosyncrasies, I don't know if it's of South Carolina or quite common, things like this, how, for example, the chief prosecutor, the judges are elected. What are some of the idiosyncrasies you think that may work in favor or work against Alex Murdaugh in this trial, regardless of guilt?
Well, I mean, as it relates to the Yeah. Well, as it relates to the judges, look, I don't know the right way to pick judges. I mean, you hear, where you get popularly elected judges. I mean, that's obviously that's kind of weird. And in South Carolina, the legislature picks judges. I mean, I could argue, frankly, either one of those systems, and I don't think there's anything. I mean, I think that while the system that we have in South Carolina of legislators picking judges certainly has its negative sides, I mean, there's some positive sides to it too. So setting that aside, I mean, I think what's kind of interesting to me is this. All right. So for a couple of generations, that family, the Murdoch family, was we call them solicitors here. That is what we call in South Carolina the prosecutors. In other words, the county prosecutor, who was the state prosecutor for the county, was also in the law firm. So 1 week a Murdoch could be in front of you prosecuting a crime, and the next week in front of a different jury asking for those people who know that he's what's standing between them and being prosecuted, standing in front of them asking for money on a civil case. So you can see how the recoveries in Hampton County were dramatically inflated, right? And if you look at it, I mean, they were fine lawyers. They weren't like F. Lee Baileys or anything. And so you have to look at it and you wonder, why were those why was that so inflated? Well, a lot of people think it's because of the undue influence of allowing the person that was also in charge of prosecuting crimes to then the next week be asking those same people for money on a case.
So
does that make sense?
It does. No, very much.
It doesn't make sense, but does what I'm telling you, do you follow it? Because it doesn't make sense. I'll agree that, but it's the way it was, and it's unfair,
Well, and I think certainly some of the ties, even the defense lawyer for Murdoch, and the fact that he is simultaneously also a legislator. What did you have any interaction with that firm in particular yourself as U.S. attorney, or even about that county? If you tell us, but sort of some context in terms of Hampton County itself.
Look, my experiences with Hampton and Colleton County were, when I was U.S. attorney, were primarily, I believe very strongly that, the role of the federal government was to do what the states or counties were unwilling or unable to do, whether that was civil rights or whether it was voting rights or, but, one of the things that those counties just didn't have a tax base. And so I felt that, that my view of federalism was that the federal government shouldn't be getting involved in street crimes in counties, the more wealthy counties in South Carolina. Now, Hampton and Colleton County are, especially Hampton, are they're poor counties. And so I was willing to go to those counties and to put federal resources and law enforcement there because, they just didn't have a tax base.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, yeah, they're poor. And, one of the interesting things is that a lot of people haven't thought about, though, is see Beaufort County used to be part of that used to be Beaufort, Colleton, and Hampton County. Well, once they built Hilton Head, the dynamics and the politics changed a lot. Okay, mm-hmm. Because Beaufort County wasn't as insular as Hampton, and to a little bit lesser degree, Colleton County. So that really changed the dynamics there a lot.
Now, Alex Murdaugh did go on the stand. I wasn't sure. Typically, that's not advised. How did you view that? Because he is also somebody who's been a prosecutor. Any thoughts in terms of whether that's a useful strategy?
Look, the law throughout the country is, all right, someone who stands accused of a crime, which is what Alex Murdaugh, there are allegations that he committed 2 murders, right? He's got a right. The only person that can really make that decision, because it's a right to testify, right? It's actually a right to remain silent. It's a right not to testify. You don't have a right to testify. You have a right not to testify, mm-hmm. Okay? And it not be held against you. And the only person that can make a decision about whether to waive that right or not is the defendant, all right? Now, as long as the defendant or the accused is competent, it's their decision. So at the end of the day, I've done a lot of criminal defense work, and, you advise your client, and that client makes that decision on their own. Now, there are some cases that are very, very difficult to do without the defendant taking stand. Primary example being self-defense, but this was not a self-defense case. And, we're just going to have to wait and see. Everybody's got an opinion about whether it was the right idea for him to take a stand or not. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter what our opinion is. The only person's opinion that matters is what the jury thinks, well, right? We'll probably find out.
I'm curious about your opinion, though, since you were, U.S. attorney for such. You've seen many cases of this. Would you have advised him to do that?
Well, look, I don't know. I have had clients where I have said, look, I really think you probably should consider this. Okay. But, it's whenever they have got information that no one else has. And the only way to get that information in front of the jury is through them. Like there's no other avenue to get it in. I'm not really sure what he brought to the table except for a denial. Now, that denial might be a lot. And of course, he shared with us that he called his son Paw Paw, which is something nobody had ever heard before. But,
That's normally a term for one's grandfather, isn't it? Not one's son.
Yeah. I mean, it's historically, yeah. He was a little young to be called a Paw Paw, but, whatever. But look, I wasn't close to the family. I don't know. Maybe he did call him Paw Paw. But, I mean, to talk about reasons why it might have been a good idea to take a record, take the stand. Look, he doesn't have any prior record. I mean, well, he's getting ready to. I mean, the problem with him taking the stand was he had to admit to all those financial crimes, right? And so, I mean, it was dicey.
What one thing
I'm not going to second guess anybody.
Well, so the financial crimes, to that point, it did result, I believe they had to pay out $8 million of money that he had stolen from clients, dissolve the firm. As I said, it seems to be reconstituting in a new form. But that lack of checks and balances shocked me. Did it shock you?
Oh, absolutely. No. I mean, from top to bottom over there, right? And that's what I kind of started out saying. Like, I mean, while there's a lot about this sort of uniquely Southern Gothic. I get it, but the reality of it is that this takes place throughout the world, in places where there is unbridled power and zero checks and balances. Okay, this is just human nature. This is what happens when average people are given, way too much power and no checks and balances. This is what happens. And it's happened throughout time. Okay. Throughout time. And, that's why we have to have checks and balances.
Is there anything that would stop Alex Murdaugh, if he's convicted on any of these crimes, from profiting from those crimes? I know that, I'm here in New York. There were Son of Sam laws, which have come under,
Right.
scrutiny and et cetera, fallen in many states.
Yeah.
What about South Carolina?
I mean, to my knowledge, there's nothing, I mean, the problem would be, I hate to be flippant about it, but like, would anybody believe him? I mean, at this point, that's, maybe, or I guess there's sort of some like, sort of like watching the wrecks at a stock car race, but aside from that, yeah.
What will you be watching for now? So, put on your former chief prosecutor hat. Is there any area that we have not explored? We tend to cover these things like sports, so it's, day to day, and it's, of course, gripping in many ways. But to stand back, what do you think really needs to be established at this point, and what will you be looking for?
I think the defense, look, both those guys, the defense lawyers, are friends of mine, right? And there are, some of the members of the prosecution team are friends of mine, right? I think that and I've mainly done defense. I've done a little bit of prosecution. But I think that the prosecution's goal right now is to like sort of tune out all the noise, right? They don't have to prove why, they allege he killed them. They don't have to prove that, right? And so I think that, the forensics that were done there, look, that's a tough job. Okay. And yes, the forensics could have been better. I've never defended a case where you look at the forensics and go, well, they got all that right. Because it's hard, it just doesn't ever happen. Right. But at the end of the day, if I'm the prosecution, I think you need to be saying, all right, look, we acknowledge there's some stuff was screwed up on the forensics, but this isn't a forensics case, right? The forensics aren't what tie him to the crime, to the allegations, right? I do think that they should, the prosecution is making, I hope they back off this thing that he like hated them. Look, sometimes people kill people because they love them, right? And so, I don't think you have to hate them to have committed that crime. I do think that they might be able to make some hay about, the opioid addiction. I mean, there is an ignorance among a lot of people that folks like, going back to like reefer madness, that people take, opioids are going to do crazy things. Well, they might be able to make some hay with that. The defense, I mean, look, Dick Harpootlian's my neighbor, and Jim Griffin, his kids and my kids are friends, and I'm friends with Jim. I've hung around with Jim, and they've done a really good job of, and they just really need to keep, I mean, they don't need to prove who did it. They don't need to prove he didn't do it. And look, this is the way the system works, and it works. Okay. But I think that they need to, and they've done a good job so far of saying, look, are you really sure? I mean, it's a reasonable doubt case, right? And so, the government needs to keep the jury focused. And I think the defense, just needs to keep talking about, is this the kind of thing you really feel comfortable about, and we'll see what happens. I mean, I think we'll know this week. I mean, my understanding is they're going to rest on today. The prosecution, well, the government will probably have a witness or two they'll want to put up to clean some things up. And then it'll probably be over this week.
So we've seen Netflix specials, lots of fascination. I get it. This is obviously, we're talking about multiple murders beyond this trial. How you mentioned Southern Gothic. How have you felt the media coverage has been? Has it adequately captured the culture of South Carolina? Do you feel it's been sort of, exaggerated in some ways? Or are you happy with, like, this is the way a case should be covered?
I mean, look, let me say this, okay? And this is just my personal sort of bias, right? Is that, like, I was watching, and I've watched all of them. My wife is very informed on this. Let's put it that way. I was watching a Netflix one over the weekend, and, it's really great that one of the first people to start talking about this was like a local newspaper guy, and it's good. And, we've got, this Fitz News and Mandy Matt. Yeah, I've had some issues with the way they cover some things, but I mean, I will say this, they recognized that there was something wrong there. And I will give them credit for, really staying on it and not letting it get swept under the rug.
Yeah.
And so as a whole, there have been some sort of Puritan coverage of it. And, people sort of lost. I mean, look, I've got my opinions about all of this, but, about what happened. But I think, we need to remember that, in America, and I'm not saying this because I'm on anybody's team, but like, people are innocent until they're proven guilty. And it's a circumstantial case. The government's had a tough row to hoe on it. But because it's circumstantial, but that doesn't mean it's not a good case. So I think that the positives of the media, I would say I really admire the smaller media that really stayed on this thing and got it the attention that it deserves, so that I get to talk to you.
Yeah, and broke the story of insurance fraud. You're right. You're right. It was triumph of local media, which is great.
That's right. So. But the other thing, one of the reasons I agreed to talk to you was y'all have been doing there've been a lot of people that have, kind of just gotten a little off, a little off the track on this thing. And y'all have maintained and been like and there are people that are still covering this with a very sober voice. And I applaud that as well.
Great. Well, fascinating. Obviously, as you say, innocent till proven guilty, and we shall see. But thanks for joining us, Bill.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Great.